Hello everyone and welcome to Vinayak Speaks. This is the first episode of an online talk show. The need to create this is because often in our primetime TV debates, a lot of conversations get left behind. Think of this as the voice after the noise. Today, we have a very esteemed guest with us, someone who needs no introduction. I'd like to introduce to you Lieutenant General Hooda. Thank you, sir, and thank you very much for participating. He has studied at the NDA, the National Defence Academy, and last, he was in charge of the Northern Command, which was responsible for the surgical strike in Uri. Sir, thank you for being here, and I'm going to start this dialogue and discussion with a series of questions which I think the whole nation wants to know. Sir, first and foremost, you have recently released this national security book or doctrine for the Congress party, and I probably understand this to be the first attempt by any political party in this direction, and this is quite a unique effort. What was the thought behind this? How did this sort of thought germane, and how did it lead to this?
See, Vinayak, it's been said in the strategic community for a long time that India lacks a national security strategy, and it's the absence of this strategy that actually, prevents us from having a coherent plan as far as tackling national security threats are concerned. I was very happy that the Congress party, commissioned a task force to prepare a national security strategy document. So we sat down with a large number of experts from various fields: strategic, diplomacy, social sciences, police, intelligence, and tried to take a holistic look at what our national security strategy should be. And the result is this document that is there with you now.
It's a fabulous read, and it's available online publicly. Everybody should look through it. I've actually gone through it more than once. So you speak a lot about both India's external threats as well as our internal threats. As far as external threats are concerned, for the next 20 to 30 years, according to you, what are the top 2 or 3 threats that India face externally?
So let's not talk of threats. It appears as if there's something highly dangerous. Let's talk about security and strategic challenges. And I think the primary sort of challenge is going to be the rise of China, because you have in Asia for the first time in history that you have 2 rising sort of powers, China and India, and I see call it a strategic competition in the future that is inevitable, and how we the 2 countries deal with it, I think in some ways is going to define sort of the future of Asia. So that to me is probably our biggest security challenge. And looking around in the neighborhood again, Pakistan, there is sort of abiding hostility of Pakistan towards India. They've been carrying on this problem in Kashmir. Again, the manner in which we are going to tackle it will not only sort of define our external relations, but also sort out a lot of the internal security problem in Kashmir.
As far as you mentioned both China and Pakistan, I'd like to touch upon Pakistan a little bit more. It seems to me that the Pakistan doctrine or lack of a doctrine has been that we've been flip-flop. We go through from hugs to war, from war to mangoes, and there has been no consistent doctrine. We're at best tactical but not strategic. Where are we missing sort of the pulse?
So Vinayak, I've written here also in this that I think when we look at Pakistan, we need a consistent long-term strategy. As you rightly said, there have been a lot of flip-flops over this, and then somehow we tend to also think that one odd incident like a cross-border strike is going to actually resolve all our problems with Pakistan, or Pakistan is going to stop promoting terrorism. That is not going to happen. So you need a consistent long-term strategy which combines your diplomacy, international isolation, political steps, and where required, if we need to use military force in a limited way to counter terror sort of strikes, even that can be done. But we need to look at it in a consistent long-term manner. I don't think we are going to get any short-term results. So let's look at it over a period of time and then see where it goes.
So it's interesting because while our civilization comes from the culture of Arthashastra and Chanakya, and therefore we were always very historically strategic thinkers. But in recent times, it's, as I said, it seems to me as an outsider that we are at best tactical and not strategic. And you look at other countries, China is a good example. There are some others like Israel where they're strategic.
Yeah.
Why is it that we lack a strategic doctrine of any kind?
I think somehow we haven't, sort of put our heads to it ever since independence. I also think, a lot of our style is very personalized in the leadership, and therefore we have not been able to get a consensus on what should be a long-term vision for India, and that's why I think documents like this are important.
Yeah.
Because it not only sort of provides guidance to what the political leadership is looking, but also various organs of government will then say, this is the broad direction in which we need to move, and therefore our detailed plans to be able to achieve.
Yeah.
I mean, typically you see this also in Kashmir, because we've said a number of times we've been able to bring the security situation under control, but because corresponding political steps were not taken, that we are not able to find a long-term solution to the Kashmir problem. So if you have a strategy in place, I think it helps in at least deciding the direction in which you want to go.
Sir, you talk about Kashmir. At one point under BJP Prime Minister Vajpayee ji, he coined a slogan which became very popular and captured the popular imagination, which was Kashmiriyat, Jamhuriyat, Insaniyat. However, in the last 5 years, and you write about that in your document, there has been a complete disconnect. If you look at the number of young people, talking about Sharia, talk about the number of young people wanting to join the terror groups. Look at the number of ceasefire violations. I think they've gone through a jump of more than 500%.
Yeah.
You look at civilian casualties. You look at the number of armed forces who've been martyred. What happened?
I think we tended to look at Kashmir purely from a security perspective, and I think that's where we ignored the political ramifications. We ignored signs of radicalization, youth joining terrorism, as you said. I also think we were not able to effectively communicate to the people that here the government is there for you. Somehow that strategic narrative and strategic communications we were not able to give out, and by focusing too much on security aspects, like people call it the muscular approach, I think we tended to move only in one direction, and that's why we are seeing the situation somewhat not very good today.
And so you're one of the few and one of the finest, not just security operators, but also thinkers, because a lot of people who've donned the uniform tend to think and preach a lot of hawkish strategies. You're one of the rare people who've been able to marry a hawkish approach, yes, but also a humane approach, where you talk about winning hearts and minds. You've served in Kashmir, you've served in Kargil, you've written a lot about this. There is a complete political vacuum in Kashmir right now. We don't even have a proper government at this point. Did we fail the people of Kashmir?
Well, let's say it, the situation is not looking good. There is also not only the problem in Kashmir. You see what is happening in Jammu Kashmir today is you see a growing divide even between Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah.
And therefore, certainly, when you look at the atmosphere and look at the people, alienation has certainly increased. There is much more anger on the streets among the youth. So there is a sense that we need an outreach program for the people. We need an intrastate dialogue where people can sit together. We need to strengthen civil society, and I think if we do all of that, it is only then that we are going to start looking at some ways to sort out the problem in Kashmir.
So moving on from Kashmir and Pakistan, recently, and I think you've written and commented on this recently. Something which has again become very controversial, is the AFSPA. And political parties' manifestos have spoken about it, and opponents have sort of tried to criticize it. I'd like your view on this because you've been on the ground.
So, Vinayak, my view, and again, it's a personal view, because the army officially may have some view, but my personal view is that AFSPA requires a review, and I'm not saying that merely from the perspective of human rights, which obviously are important, but also from the perspective of the military itself. You see, after the 2016 Supreme Court judgment in the fake killing cases in Manipur, about 700 officers and men approached the Supreme Court saying that they feel that AFSPA is not giving them sufficient protection, or the rulings that were given in some sense diluted the protection provided by AFSPA. So, if it is a law which is not liked by human rights activists and civil society activists, the army itself is feeling that AFSPA is not able to give them the kind of protection that they deserve. I think if you have such a law which is not helping anybody, it's time for it to be reviewed and look at both the aspects, the human rights aspect and also the genuine requirements of soldiers who are operating in the area. So, I think it's time for a review.
Playing devil's advocate, sir, but wouldn't certain people argue that you're going to prevent security operations and harm security operations almost if you dilute or revise the AFSPA?
So, I think we need to use use the terms properly. So, I'm saying review it to strengthen human rights, review it to strengthen the hands of the forces, and there is no dichotomy, I think, between the two. Both can be done. You see, people have started instead of review, they are using terms like dilute it or remove it, which actually is not true. But I'm saying it's something that needs a review now.
And you're saying it needs a review not just from a civil society human right point of view, but even from the army's point of view.
Absolutely.
Are there any specific areas of review or recommendations?
See, what happened after the 2016 judgment, there were three things which the Supreme Court said. Firstly, they said investigations can be carried out by, even if the army is carried out, the investigation cannot be carried out by any other organization, the CBI or the police. They said soldiers can also be tried in civil criminal courts. So, with all this, they also talked about you cannot use excessive force even against what is considered an enemy. How do you judge excessive force? In a situation where you're in Kashmir, something happens after 2 years, investigations are done and a trial comes up. I mean, how is it that you are going to judge excessive force? So, I think some of these issues also need to be taken up for greater debate, so that the army itself is a little more comfortable when carrying out operations.
So, this is interesting. What you're saying is that there may be actually popular support to review the AFSPA from even within the army.
As I said, like this is my personal,
in your personal
it's my personal viewpoint, but I think there is now, particularly after this 2016 judgment, there is a feeling that maybe the law needs to be reviewed, so that I think it helps both sides, the human rights angle as well as the security forces angle. If there was no worry in the military, why would 700 officers go to court?
And this is very interesting, and to me almost a revelation, because so far we've only heard the human rights side of the argument, but what you're putting across is a army side of the argument, at least in your personal opinion, which you think is not tangential to the human rights side. That's a very interesting point of view, sir. Moving on, you again, I think in this document, write about again the need for review of the civil military discourse and the civilian military sort of relationship, also the political military relationship. Before touching upon that, sir, how do you feel as somebody who has served in uniform risks his life, sacrificed for the nation. When you see certain political people, after whether it's a surgical strike or after the Balakot sort of airstrike, they don army uniform, or the photos of martyrs and wing commander Abhinandan are shown in election rallies, and then they're chanting slogans as if the politician himself sat in the airplane and did the airstrike.
I think any wise person has taken this principled position that the army must be kept away from politics. Numerous people have spoken about it, numerous people have talked about it. It's not good for Indian democracy if the army gets politicized. We've seen what has happened in our neighborhood. I don't think we will go that far. My real worry is that the first damage that will come is to the army itself, because as Samuel Huntington has written in his book, one way that the army is kept away from politics is by professionalization. So if you have a professional army, it does its own work and is just kept away from politics. The minute you start looking at politicization of the military, the first thing that is going to suffer is our own professionalism, and that to me is a big worry. What happens to the military itself? So I think, as I said before, the principled stand of everybody should be, please keep the military away from politics.
That being said, sir, the counter one hears is that this is really great for morale, this is really great to boost the image of the forces, and they need this from time to time, and therefore what is wrong? In fact, you're a true patriot, some say, if you support the army and if you do such kind of activities and promote, sacrifices of the martyrs.
No, I think, see, that there is no harm in supporting. I don't see anybody who says we don't support the army. Irrespective of cutting across party lines, I don't hear anybody saying the army, the Air Force is not supported by a political party. I think what should be avoided is blatant sort of use of the army to win political arguments. So you have political arguments, don't bring in the army in order to win that political argument.
So do you think that when you see something like this, or when your colleagues who are still serving see this, they don't appreciate it, or they're agnostic to it, or they?
No, I think we've grown up in an environment where we are told to be completely apolitical, and I don't think anybody in the army would support any kind of politicization. You heard the army chief in December 2017. I think he said that the army should not be politicized. So I don't think anybody in uniformed or among the veteran community, would be okay with the idea of some kind of political linkages within the army.
In fact, the Election Commission has taken strong objection to this and has served a notice to all political parties to prevent this from happening further. Do you think, sir, I'm going to ask you a pointed question, do you think this government particularly is guilty of trying to leverage the army and security operations for electoral benefits?
See, we are seeing some of that, although frankly, like I avoid, political debates and arguments on, this government or that government, but certainly there are some indications that we are seeing.
You're seeing something. How do you feel, sir, on a lighter note, how do you feel that there has been a movie made around your valor and your sacrifices? You're a Bollywood star now almost.
I'm not a Bollywood star, so Vicky Kaushal is, but I think it was a well-made movie. I won't talk about whether, how real it was. I think it was a well-made movie, and it's all right that, people get to talk about some operations that have taken place. But I won't go, give it more importance than that.
So how much of it was fact, how much of it was fiction, you're not at privy to comment?
Yeah, it's a movie, so I think we should look at it as a movie.
With a poetic license.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I could take the liberty of asking you, sir, how's the Josh?
Josh is okay.
Sir, moving on, any So we're talking about the civil-military discourse and looking at revisions, looking at certain reforms even within the military. There are certain things like the one rank, one pension, which keeps getting spoken about. Related, there is also, the, I think, pay for the paramilitary, which keeps getting spoken about. And I think, again, you've commented on that. Where do you think we're headed in that direction, and where are we getting it wrong?
See, no, I think there are some genuine concerns on issues of, pension, pay-related issues, unresolved anomalies of the 7th Pay Commission. There are issues about, court cases, particularly in disability cases. I think we need to look at this very seriously, because these are not major problems. These are not issues that cannot be fixed, but they impact. For example, disability cases. If you see a disabled soldier running to Supreme Court, fighting a case for a few hundred rupees, I think the optics are bad. So these are things that the government, I seriously feel should look at and try and resolve them to whatever extent possible.
Do you think we've got the OROP right so far? Because there are critics who say it's not really one rank, one pension, it's one rank, many pensions.
It is, although to be fair, let's say 80-85% was accepted. Now, could we have gone, for example, instead of reviewing every 5 years to reviewing every 2-3 years? That was possible. Maybe the government should look at it, because as I said again, this is something that to me appears, not too difficult to fix, because you've already gone most of the way.
Yeah.
So if you seriously look at it, I think there can be some way that can be found which will, satisfy the government, satisfy the veterans. I think there is a meeting ground.
There is still some room to improve on that. Moving on, sir, something you speak again a lot about is on our capabilities, equipment, technology, indigenization. Reports say that more than 68% of our current equipment is under the vintage category. Now that doesn't make anybody comfortable when you have, ambitious neighbors like China and notorious neighbors like Pakistan. 68% vintage. Is that accurate, and what do we do about that?
No, so it's accurate because, the Vice Chief has said this, in a parliamentary committee. So obviously, it's not something that that could be taken as something that's fake or something. What can we do? One, of course, is I think we need sufficient budgets. The budgetary allocation today is not enough for modernization, and particularly in the army, where almost 85% of the budget is actually going for revenue and not into capital.
Yeah.
So there is no way with this kind of budget you can actually carry out the modernization that you want. So one is that you need to enhance your budget. Also, which the army is now doing, and I think the services are doing, is to review our own force structures to see where some kind of savings are possible.
Where there is wastage.
Yeah. Well, savings are possible in the manpower component of the military, without sacrificing your capability. So that exercise also needs to be done, which the army is doing. But again, the bottom line is the budget is insufficient for modernization.
And again, there is some statistic to say that as a defense expenditure today as a percentage of GDP is at all-time low.
Yeah, it is.
So not only is the lion's share of the budget going towards non-capital expenditure, it's also as a total sum a very low number today.
That's right.
So both the pie size needs to increase, and the composition of the pie also needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talk a lot about indigenization of technologies and how we are today dependent even on something simple like software on Microsoft. And Microsoft, for example, has been notorious to partner with the sort of intelligence communities in the US, and that's their first priority. They, whether it's Cisco, whether it's Microsoft or other sort of technology providers, they've in fact even been accused of leaving backdoors when they sell those equipment and software to foreign countries. You've tried to speak about indigenization even of software, like the BOSS initiative within the army. Where do you see that? Because what I see, and please correct me, what I see is a macro at best, a macro spray and pray approach, where you have some money, you give some to DRDO, you give some to DST, you give some to the Army Design Bureau, for example, and then you hope something happens. As opposed to learning from, let's say, Brazil or South Korea or China, where there is a micro, very targeted approach. What are your views? Can you see India building world-class product category, deep technology businesses out of India? And I'm talking about new businesses, new ventures, or what's sometimes called startups.
So Vinayak, I think it's possible. Where we are sort of missing is the government hand-holding. You know, we have this Make 1 and Make 2.
Yeah.
Make 2 is that, you know, the R&D costs are borne by the person who's the design and development costs are borne by the person who's manufacturing it, and then even after that he's not very sure whether he's going to get the order or not.
Yeah.
So unless the government steps in more and, you know, in terms of financial support, in terms of design development costs,
Yeah.
in terms of some assurance, you know, of orders, I think it's not as if we don't have the capability. If you now going to start making F-16s in India, so it isn't as if over a period of time the capability cannot be developed, but government support needs to substantially improve. And as far as the DRDO is concerned, I think they need to now get out of, they are in a number of low technology areas, producing juices and foods, and I think they need to get out of those low technology areas and focus on, you know, really high tech areas.
If you you must be aware of the work of a former US politician, Ash Carter, and he actually, you know, really tried to invigorate the sort of Pentagon and the DARPA there, and try to, you know, bridge the connect between Washington DC and Silicon Valley, and how do you bring young startups. And I'm not talking about big companies, I'm talking about young startups and how do they work for defense. Today what you one sees is that there is a suspicion, whether you talk about DRDO, you talk about NTRO and some other agencies, they look at the smaller Indian startups with suspicion, but they look at the Israeli company as if they're best friends.
Yeah, that's true. So that's where I think, you know, greater interaction between the industry, the startups, the user, which is the military, the R&D, which is not only DRDO, but I think we should start engaging with you know, universities, even the R&D setup.
Absolutely.
That is there with a large number of companies. So that integration, you know, needs to be done.
And so I think you, again in this document, you say that there is too much emphasis and obsession on the offset side of things, and less on exactly what you're saying. Fund the design costs, fund the R&D costs, give the grants. What would be your 3 or 4, or from a technology, high technology point of view in defense subsystems specifically, your 4 or 5 areas that we should focus on and try and build Indian companies in those areas?
So
whether it's radar, sensors, software.
So one of course is, you know, our own software that we need. As you said, you know, we are completely reliant on Microsoft, Cisco routers, etc. So we need our own sort of software systems for this. We are guns, for example, big artillery guns. Again, we are you know, reliant on systems. Our air defense systems is something that we need, and of course our you know, fighting vehicles, both in terms of APCs and tanks. So if these 3-4 core areas, you know, we could start looking at building up our indigenous industry. Huge lot of imports that we are doing, you know, that can get sorted out.
Again, some numbers that were told to me that we procure radars, something as small as radar, certain kinds of radars, every year to the tune of thousands, and we are all buying it from foreign companies. While the technology capability exists in India today to build those radars.
True.
But we are not entertaining those Indian companies.
True. So that's what I said. You know, it's the government must have policies that encourage indigenous industry from coming up. So it's not as if the talent is not available or it cannot be made available, but unless there is, you know, greater support by the government. So as I said, the Ministry of Defense must actually be the lead player and take ownership of indigenization.
On the Ministry of Defense point, you mentioned in one of your interviews that the no more ex-former Minister Defense Minister, the late Manohar Parrikar ji, was keen on doing initiatives and innovation and new reforms, but he faced a lot of resistance from, let's say, the Finance Ministry, and he was not able to get work done because the Finance Ministry was just not playing ball.
Well, in some cases we did see that, where procedures need to be fast-tracked, and there, you sometimes face bureaucratic hurdles of how can we change our procedures, how can we even give one-time sort of dispensations. You are aware, and it's not I'm saying that. I think it was the Minister of State for Defense who said each and every procurement is getting delayed. So procedures need to be fine-tuned, and I think also individuals in the chain who are responsible for clearance of cases, if there are delays there, I think we should hold them also accountable.
Don't you think, in terms of an idea for reform, that at least up to a certain quantum or budget, the MOD should be given a free hand, carte blanche check without any interference from the Ministry of Finance?
Yeah, so they have. I think at each level, there is a devolution of financial powers of how much can be done. Whether some more needs to be done, I think that is something that the government can look at.
There's a lot of talk and a lot of fascination with Israel, and it's become very fashionable these days. One is on their security operations, the other is on their covert abilities, which allegedly we lack, and third is on their high technology. Where can we learn from Israel, if at all anywhere? Because the one commonality one can argue Israel has with us is they have an interesting, for lack of a creative sort of word, or a difficult neighborhood.
Yeah.
India has a difficult neighborhood, Israel has a difficult neighborhood. What can we learn from them in A, the way they conduct their operations, B, their covert abilities globally, and C, their high technology?
So I think as far as conduct of operations is concerned, and I've written about this, I think the conditions that they face and the sort of Israel-Palestine conflict, I think the nature of it is different from what we are facing in our internal security problems. So I think that is something that we need to do for ourselves, but certainly in areas of covert intelligence capability, and more so in terms of how they managed to use technology and create sort of niche sectors, particularly in defense technologies. It's something that we need to learn from them.
Sir, a couple of more technical questions then before we move on to slightly the more socio-economic, political
Getting
section.
late also.
What's
11:40.
Okay. Then I'll skip some of the sections quickly. Couple of questions. You speak about nuclear and that India has a no first use policy. There have been those who've written now that India has actually is looking to review the no first use policy. Shiv Shankar Menon has also written about it. There are others from MIT, for example, who also written about it. What is India's stance on nuclear? Do we still have a no first use policy, or is that flexible?
No, so we have officially we have a no first use policy. Does it now require some sort of debate? Because Pakistan doesn't have a declared no first use policy. China has, but it's couched in very opaque terms. So is there a need to debate and discuss this, whether it should be done behind closed doors by the government? It's something for them to decide, but obviously as time goes by, I think there is a need to sit back and review your various doctrines. You might still say we stick by no first use, but I think some debate and some discussion should definitely take place on a time to time basis.
Thank you. Last couple of questions, sir. One question that's on everybody's mind again is, when is General Hooda joining active politics?
So right now I have no plans, Vinayak, of joining active politics.
But there is a possibility in the future.
Well, as of now, I'm not thinking about it.
Sir, what would be your message to the young India, those who are looking for a career in the forces and just generally otherwise young people? We're a country primarily made up of young people today.
Yeah, so actually they are the future of this country today, and they need to start looking, I think, at what are the challenges that they are going to face in future, and the challenges are many. Vinayak, you've seen it, particularly how do you skill yourself, how do you make yourself better, very fast changing sort of environment that is going to come, particularly in terms of technology. How are you gearing yourself up to face up to this world? We have a very diverse country. We have different communities. We know social media is putting pressures. The kind of narratives that are building up. What is the future that you want for yourself? What kind of country do you want for yourself? I mean, these are major issues that the youngsters will have to confront.
And they're also coping with a world because of social media where there is a complete death of nuance, where everything should be black and white. Yeah. You're a national and you're an anti-national. There is nothing in the gray anymore.
Yeah. So that's what I said. These are issues that I think the youth need to take note of, to debate and see what kind of society you want to build for yourself.
On that note, sir, this will be a wrap. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure and an honor that you were able to take out time. And I look forward to having more such debates and discussions.
Thank you.
I take the opportunity whenever I can to pick your brain. I learn and I come out wiser from it. I hope this was productive and fruitful for you.
Thank you.
And for the viewers. And I'll summarize by saying thank you so much for watching Vinayak Speaks. And because of the company, I'm compelled to say Jai Hind, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jai Hind.